Section 41 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, Section 41. Dear Lucy, it occurs to me to inquire what you've been doing with yourself for the last month or two. Not that I suspect you would have the least difficulty in giving an account of your proceedings. I dare say you have been just as busy and as happy as ourselves at La Terrasse. As to Graham, his professional connection extends daily. He is so much sought after, so much engaged, that I tell him he will grow quite conceited. Like a right good mother, as I am, I do my best to keep him down. No flattery does he get from me, as you know. And yet, Lucy, he is a fine fellow. His mother's heart dances at the sight of him. After being hurried here and there the whole day, and passing the ordeal of 50 sorts of tempers, and combating 100 caprices, and sometimes witnessing cruel sufferings, perhaps occasionally, as I tell him, inflicting them, at night he still comes home to me in such kindly, pleasant mood, that really I seem to live in a sort of moral antipodes, and on these January evenings my day rises when other people's night sets in. Still he needs keeping in order, and correcting, and repressing, and I do him that good service, but the boy is so elastic there is no such thing as vexing him thoroughly. When I think I have at last driven him to the sullens, he turns on me with jokes for retaliation, but you know him and all his iniquities, and I am but an elderly simpleton to make him the subject of this epistle. As for me, I have had my old Breton agent here on a visit, and have been plunged over head and ears in business matters. I do so wish to regain for Graham at least some part of what his father left him. He laughs to scorn my anxiety on this point, bidding me look and see how he can provide for himself and me too, and asking what the old lady can possibly want that she has not, hinting about sky-blue turbans, accusing me of an ambition to wear diamonds, keep livery servants, have an hotel, and lead the fashion amongst the English clan in Villette. Talking of sky-blue turbans, I wish you had been with us the other evening. He had come in really tired, and after I had given him his tea, he threw himself into my chair with his customary presumption. To my great delight, he dropped asleep. You know how he teases me about being drowsy, I who never by any chance close an eye by daylight. While he slept, I thought he looked very bonny, Lucy, fool as I am to be so proud of him, but who can help it? Show me his peer. Look where I will, I see nothing like him in Villette. Well, I took it into my head to play him a trick. So I brought out the sky-blue turban, and handling it with gingerly precaution, I managed to invest his brows with this grand adornment. I assure you it did not at all misbecome him. He looked quite Eastern, except that he is so fair. Nobody, however, can accuse him of having red hair. Now, it is genuine chestnut, a dark, glossy chestnut, and when I put my large cashmere about him, there was as fine a young bay, Dey, or Pasha improvised as you would wish to see. It was good entertainment, but only half enjoyed, since I was alone. You should have been there. In due time my lord awoke. The looking-glass above the fireplace soon intimated to him his plight. As you may imagine, I now live under threat and dread of vengeance. But to come to the gist of my letter. I know Thursday is a half-holiday in the Rue Fossette. Be ready, then, by 5 in the afternoon, at which hour I will send the carriage to take you out to La Terrasse. Be sure to come. You may meet some old acquaintance. Good-bye, my wise, dear, grave little goddaughter. Very truly yours, Louisa Breton. Now, a letter like that sets one to rights. I might still be sad after reading that letter, but I was more composed, not exactly cheered, perhaps, but relieved. My friends, at least, were well and happy. No accident had occurred to Graham. No illness had seized his mother. Calamities that had so long been my dream and thought. Their feelings for me, too, were as they had been. Yet how strange it was to look on Mrs. Breton's 7 weeks and contrast them with my 7 weeks. Also, how very wise it is in people placed in an exceptional position to hold their tongues, and not rashly declare how such position galls them. The world can understand well enough the process of perishing for want of food. Perhaps few persons can enter into or follow out that of going mad from solitary confinement. They see the long-buried prisoner disinterred, a maniac or an idiot. How his senses left him, how his nerves, first inflamed, underwent nameless agony, and then sunk to palsy, is a subject too intricate for examination, too abstract for popular comprehension. Speak of it, you might almost as well stand up in an European marketplace and propound dark sayings in that language and mood wherein Nebuchadnezzar, the imperial hypochondriac, communed with his baffled Chaldeans. And long, long may the minds to whom such themes are no mystery, by whom their bearings are sympathetically seized, be few in number and rare of re-encounter. Long may it be generally thought that physical privations alone merit compassion, and that the rest is a figment. When the world was younger and haler than now, moral trials were a deeper mystery still. Perhaps in all the land of Israel there was but one Saul, certainly but one David, to soothe or comprehend him. The keen, still cold of the morning was succeeded, later in the day, by a sharp breathing from Russian wastes. The cold zone sighed over the temperate zone, and froze it fast. A heavy firmament, dull and thick with snow, sailed up from the north, and settled over expectant Europe. Towards afternoon began the descent. I feared no carriage would come, the white tempest raged so dense and wild. But trust my godmother, once having asked, she would have her guest. About 6 o'clock I was lifted from the carriage over the already blocked up front steps of the chateau, and put in at the door of La Terrasse. Running through the vestibule and upstairs to the drawing-room, there I found Mrs. Bretton, a summer day in her own person. Had I been twice as cold as I was, her kind kiss and cordial clasp would have warmed me. Inured now for so long a time to rooms with bare boards, black benches, desks, and stoves, the blue saloon seemed to me gorgeous. In its Christmas-like fire alone there was a clear and crimson splendor which quite dazzled me. When my godmother had held my hand for a little while, and chatted with me, and scolded me for having become thinner than when she last saw me, she professed to discover that the snow wind had disordered my hair, and sent me upstairs to make it neat and remove my shawl. Repairing to my own little sea-green room, there also I found a bright fire, and candles too were lit. A tall wax light stood on each side the great looking-glass. But between the candles and before the glass appeared something dressing itself, an airy, fairy thing, small, slight, white, a winter spirit. I declare, for one moment I thought of Graham and his spectral illusions. With distrustful eye I noted the details of this new vision. It wore white, sprinkled slightly with drops of scarlet. Its girdle was red. It had something in its hair, leafy yet shining, a little wreath with an evergreen gloss. Spectral or not, here truly was nothing frightful, and I advanced. Turning quick upon me, a large eye, under long lashes, flashed over me, the intruder. The lashes were as dark as long, and they softened with their penciling the orb they guarded. "Ah, you are come," she breathed out in a soft, quiet voice, and she smiled slowly and gazed intently. I knew her now. Having only once seen that sort of face, with that cast of fine and delicate featuring, I could not but know her. "Miss de Bassompierre," I pronounced. "No," was the reply. "Not Miss de Bassompierre for you." I did not inquire who then she might be, but waited voluntary information. "You are changed, but still you are yourself," she said, approaching nearer. "I remember you well, your countenance, the colour of your hair, the outline of your face." I had moved to the fire, and she stood opposite, and gazed into me. And as she gazed, Her face became gradually more and more expressive of thought and feeling, till at last a dimness quenched her clear vision. "It makes me almost cry to look so far back," said she. "But as to being sorry or sentimental, don't think it. On the contrary, I am quite pleased and glad. Interested, yet altogether at fault, I knew not what to say. At last I stammered, 'I think I never met you till that night, some weeks ago, when you were hurt?' She smiled. 'You have forgotten then that I have sat on your knee, been lifted in your arms, even shared your pillow. You no longer remember the night when I came crying, like a naughty little child as I was, to your bedside, and you took me in. You have no memory for the comfort and protection by which you soothed an acute distress. Go back to Breton. Remember Mr. Home. At last I saw it all.' 'And you are little Polly?' 'I am Paulina Mary Home de Bassompierre.' How time can change! Little Polly wore in her pale, small features, her fairy symmetry, her varying expression, a certain promise of interest and grace. But Paulina Mary was become beautiful, not with the beauty that strikes the eye like a rose, orbed, ruddy, and replete, not with the plump and pink and flaxen attributes of her blonde cousin Ginevra, but her 17 years had brought her a refined and tender charm, which did not lie in complexion, though hers was fair and clear, nor in outline, though her features were sweet, and her limbs perfectly turned, but, I think, rather in a subdued glow from the soul outward. This was not an opaque vase, of material however costly, but a lamp chastely lucent, guarding from extinction, yet not hiding from worship, a flame vital and vestal. In speaking of her attractions, I would not exaggerate language, but, indeed, they seemed to me very real and engaging. What though all was on a small scale, it was the perfume which gave this white-violet distinction, and made it superior to the broadest camellia, the fullest dahlia that ever bloomed. Ah, and you remember the old time at Breton? Better, said she, better perhaps than you. I remember it with minute distinctness, not only the time, but the days of the time, and the hours of the days. You must have forgotten some things. Very little, I imagine. You were then a little creature of quick feelings. You must, long ere this, have outgrown the impressions with which joy and grief, affection and bereavement, stamped your mind 10 years ago. You think I have forgotten whom I liked, and in what degree I liked them when a child? The sharpness must be gone, the point, the poignancy, the deep imprint must be softened away and effaced. I have a good memory for those days. She looked as if she had. Her eyes were the eyes of one who can remember, one whose childhood does not fade like a dream, nor whose youth vanish like a sunbeam. She would not take life, loosely and incoherently, in parts, and let one season slip as she entered on another. She would retain and add, often review from the commencement, and so grow in harmony and consistency as she grew in years. Still, I could not quite admit the conviction that all the pictures which now crowded upon me were vivid and visible to her. Her fond attachments, her sports and contests with a well-loved playmate, the patient true devotion of her child's heart, her fears, her delicate reserves, her little trials, the last piercing pain of separation, I retraced these things, and shook my head incredulous. She persisted. "The child of 7 years lives yet in the girl of 17, said she. "You used to be excessively fond of Mrs. Breton," I remarked, intending to test her. She set me right at once. "Not excessively fond," said she. "I liked her. I respected her as I should do now. She seems to me very little altered." She is not much changed, I assented. We were silent a few minutes. Glancing round the room, she said, "There are several things here that used to be at Bretton. I remember that pincushion and that looking-glass." Evidently she was not deceived in her estimate of her own memory, not at least so far. "You think, then, you would have known Mrs. Bretton?" I went on. "I perfectly remembered her, the turn of her features, her olive complexion and black hair, her height, her walk, her voice." "Dr. Bretton, of course," I pursued, "would be out of the question, and indeed, as I saw your first interview with him, I am aware that he appeared to you as a stranger." "That first night I was puzzled," she answered. "How did the recognition between him and your father come about?" "They exchanged cards. The names Graham Bretton and Home de Bassompierre gave rise to questions and explanations. That was on the second day. But before then I was beginning to know something." "How know something?" "Why," she said, "how strange it is that most people seem so slow to feel the truth, not to see but feel! When Dr. Bretton had visited me a few times, and sat near and talked to me, when I had observed the look in his eyes, the expression about his mouth, the form of his chin, the carriage of his head, and all that we do observe in persons who approach us, how could I avoid being led by association to think of Graham Bretton? Graham was slighter than he, and not grown so tall, and had a smoother face, and longer and lighter hair, and spoke not so deeply, more like a girl, but yet he is Graham, just as I am little Polly, or you are Lucy Snowe." I thought the same, but I wondered to find my thoughts hers. There are certain things in which we so rarely meet with our double that it seems a miracle when that chance befalls. "You and Graham were once playmates." "And do you remember that?" she questioned in her turn. "No doubt he will remember it also," said I. "I have not asked him. Few things would surprise me so much as to find that he did. I suppose his disposition is still gay and careless?" "Was it so formerly? Did it so strike you? Do you thus remember him?" "I scarcely remember him in any other light. Sometimes he was studious, sometimes he was merry, but whether busy with his books, or disposed for play, it was chiefly the books or game he thought of, not much heeding those with whom he read or amused himself." "Yet to you he was partial." "Partial to me? Oh no! He had other playmates, his schoolfellows. I was of little consequence to him, except on Sundays. Yes, he was kind on Sundays. I remember walking with him hand in hand to St. Mary's, and his finding the places in my prayer book, and how good and still he was on Sunday evenings, so mild for such a proud, lively boy, so patient with all my blunders in reading, and so wonderfully to be depended on. For he never spent those evenings from home. I had a constant fear that he would accept some invitation and forsake us, but he never did, nor seemed ever to wish to do it. Thus, of course, it can be no more. I suppose Sunday will now be Dr. Bretton's dining out day. Children, come down!" here called Mrs. Bretton from below. Paulina would still have lingered, but I inclined to descend. We went down. End of section 41. Recording by Leanne Fortune.